The laughter at the table felt easy and warm, forks clinking, a wine glass chiming against china, someone telling a harmless story that made everyone lean in. For a moment I believed everything about that night, the welcoming smiles, the way her mother reached for my hand when I complimented the meal, the casual jokes that made me feel like I belonged. Then she looked at me across the table, calm and unbothered, and said, with a clarity that cut through the noise, "My ex will always be part of my life. If you don't like it, leave." The sentence landed like a stone in water. The ripples were quiet, but they kept spreading. I want to take you back before that sentence, to how we arrived at that table. Because if that night was the crack that split things open, everything before it was the slow pressure that widened it. We met 2 years earlier at a mutual friend's rooftop party on a humid evening. She was laughing at something trivial, her hand tucked under her chin, and the kind of laugh that lifts a person out of a bad mood landed directly on me. We talked for hours about nothing and everything, books that had changed us, the one song that always made us cry, the odd way her family celebrated little wins. There was an ease with her that felt like home within months. We moved through the small stages of a relationship, movie nights, holiday calls with both our families, grocery runs that turned into long walks, and in those quiet, ordinary moments I began sketching a future in my head. Her family mattered to her in a way that was beautiful and complex. She had deep loyalties and long memories. She would tell stories about her childhood like chapters in a well-worn book, the neighbor who taught her to ride a bike, the aunt who made the best biryani, the ex who had been there through college heartbreaks. She never framed them as wounds. She framed them as parts of a life that made her who she was. I admired that about her. I admired her refusal to sanitize the past. But admiration quietly shifted when the past kept showing up at our table uninvited. The dinner invitation came through a text that was casual in tone but heavy with intention. "My parents are making dinner on Saturday. Would love for you to come." I remember deciding which shirt to wear, rehearsing a few stories to tell so I wouldn't fumble, buying flowers that felt like the right kind of effort. When her mother opened the door, the warmth in her smile was real. The house smelled like spices and lemon. The living room held framed photographs of birthdays and vacations, frozen joy in glossy frames. I told myself this was the moment where two parts of my life would finally begin to overlap, where her past and present would fold into something shared. Throughout the meal, the conversation was easy. Her brother, 19 and annoyingly confident, cracked jokes about our future kids' names. Her father teased her about being late to everything. I watched them and felt grateful, until the dessert reshaped the evening. Her sister, lightheaded from wine and mischief, brought up an old relationship as if it were a harmless game. "So, how often do you talk to Ryan?" she asked, adjusting her fork. Ryan was a name I had heard in passing, a figure from her longer past, someone she said had been important. I expected a simple answer. The one I got was another sentence that would sit with me for months. "Yeah, we still talk. We'll always be connected." A hush fell into the corners of the room that only other people's ribs seemed to fill. Her dad's eyebrows went up, and her mom's smile tightened the way a person's mouth does when they're trying to smooth over something uncomfortable. But what struck me most was the way she said it, not defensive, not ashamed, simply matter of fact. Then she looked at me directly and said the line again, this time aiming it like a declaration rather than a confession. "My ex will always be part of my life. If you don't like it, leave." The air tasted suddenly of metal. For the first time I noticed how uneven the table felt beneath my palm, how the chair creaked like an old thought. I tried to respond lightly. I laughed too loudly and made a joke about being dramatic to cover the thud in my chest. But laughter didn't fix the fact that her words had shifted the foundation beneath us. After dessert, while her parents cleaned up and the kids retreated to their corners, we sat close on the living room couch in a silence that buzzed with questions neither of us wanted to voice in front of the rest of the family. I asked, "Why put that out there in front of everyone?" She shrugged as if the whole thing needed no explanation, as if the presence of an ex in one's life was a simple, acceptable truth everyone should just accept. Her explanation, offered without apology, was that Ryan had been part of the most formative years of her life. They had been together in the messy, formative years, college deadlines, family illness, bad jobs, the kinds of realities that bind people tightly. She said he had been there when things were genuinely hard. He had been a support system. He had been the person who participated in rituals with her family. Cutting him out, she told me, would feel like tearing pages out of her own story. she said. I won't erase the past. And I don't think I should. Hearing that should have felt noble. Instead, it felt like a betrayal carried out with a smile. It wasn't Ryan himself that tormented me. It was the way she positioned him within our shared present as an immovable truth. I had always believed relationships require territory, boundaries that say, this is ours now. Her refusal to accept that made me feel like an intruder in our own life. Every time she mentioned Ryan in the following weeks, it was as regular as mentioning the weather. He texted on holidays. He showed up at family gatherings. She took calls that lasted long enough for me to feel invisible on the other end. Jealousy crept in quietly, not as theatrical tantrums but as a constant background noise, the way her phone would light up and my stomach would tighten, the way a laugh at a late-night memory would feel like it belonged to someone else. I tried to be rational. I told myself that trusting someone is a choice and that I had chosen to trust her. I reminded myself of the arguments we had resolved and how she had stood by me through small crises. But trust and boundaries are not the same thing. And watching someone maintain a relationship that belonged to the past as if it were a living third presence in our present felt like watching a third person sit at our table. We talked. We argued in that slow way people do when they love and hurt each other at the same time, words measured, pauses pregnant, accusations softened by attempts at understanding. I asked for clarity. I asked for lines that would make me feel secure. Can you limit how often you speak with him? Can there be times that are just ours? Can certain topics be off limits? She listened but kept steering the conversation back to the idea that erasing someone felt cruel. He helped me through my father's illness, she would say. He knows my family in ways I can't expect you to understand. The more we circled the issue, the more I realized that this was not just about Ryan. It was about two different philosophies of love and loyalty. She believed in layered connections, that people could be part of your life in multiple roles. That affection didn't expire at the end of a relationship. I believed in creating a present that prioritized the person standing before me. Her stance didn't mean she loved me less. It simply meant her emotional geography had room for people my map did not. Time stretched in those months of negotiation. We had small, tender reconciliations, holding hands on walks, making playlists for each other, laughing until our voices went thin. But there were days when the ordinary triggers cut sharper than arguments, a message on her phone, a sudden giggle at a memory I couldn't access, a photograph tucked away in her drawer. I found myself assessing moments, cataloging them like evidence. Was that laugh for me or for him? Was that late-night message meaningful or mundane? These questions eroded the spontaneity that had been the secret warmth between us. Finally, a night arrived that felt inevitable. I remember the apartment light flicking on as I walked in, the quiet smell of jasmine from a neighbor's plant drifting through the window. I felt tired in a bone-deep way. Not the tired that sleep fixes but the tired that comes from carrying a doubt so long it becomes part of your posture. I told her I couldn't keep living with this undercurrent, that loving her had come with an emotional tax I wasn't willing to pay anymore. She listened, tears halfway to the surface, then said quietly, I can't make him disappear. I won't pretend he didn't exist. If that's a deal breaker for you, I understand. There was no fight. There was a brittle, exhausted kind of agreement. In the silence after, we gathered what was left of the easy intimacy and folded it up, putting away the pages of plans, the jokes, the small domestic rituals. We parted not with the slam of slammed doors but with the slow closing of something two people once protected together. The logistics of leaving were the blandest part, moving boxes, dividing playlists, choosing which photos to keep, and the banal details made it clear that heartbreak is often administered by practicality. Months later, I learned through mutual friends that she had rekindled something with Ryan. At first that news felt like salt in an already open place. But with time the pain dulled into a clearer lesson. People's hearts have histories that sometimes point elsewhere, no matter how present and tender they can be to you. My grief was real, but the rawness eventually eroded into reflection. I thought about the idea of ownership in relationships, the expectation that love must cancel the past to be valid. And I realized my need for exclusivity came from wanting to know my place was irrefutable in her life. She wanted a life that honored continuity. Neither stance was inherently cruel. They were simply different demands of how two people might coexist. Looking back, that family dinner was less about her loyalty to an ex and more about a moment of truth. It revealed our mismatched truths, the parts about ourselves we could not, or would not, compromise. It showed me that love is not always a rescue mission. Sometimes it's a mirror that tells you who you truly are and what you truly need. The hurt taught me to be sharper about the kind of partnership I wanted, one where the present doesn't feel negotiated away, where boundaries are mutual and not unilateral. If there's anything I would tell my past self in that quiet apartment, it would be this: boundaries are not the opposite of love. They are one of its languages. You can love someone deeply and still need assurances that your time and trust are not taken for granted. Conversely, you can honor someone's past and still be faithful to the present. The trick is when those two things cannot coexist without one person feeling diminished. Now, when I think about relationships, I think less about being right and more about being compatible, not in terms of hobbies or taste, but in terms of emotional architecture. Some people carry their past like a cherished reference shelf. Others need more closed chapters. Both ways are valid, but they don't always build the same house. That dinner taught me to notice the layout before I signed the lease. I don't resent her. Resentment feels too heavy and small for what we had. I don't romanticize the breakup either. It was painful and necessary. In the quiet after, I found new spaces to inhabit, evening runs where my lungs had room for clean air, books that absorbed my restless thoughts, friendships that reminded me I existed outside a relationship narrative. Most importantly, I learned that wanting to be the only one in someone's present isn't possessiveness if it's part of an agreement both people share. It becomes possessive only when it's demanded without regard for the other person's truth. So if you ever find yourself at a table where history is placed on the plate next to your meal, take a moment to notice how it tastes to you. Does it add richness or does it leave a metallic aftertaste? There's no moral verdict in either reaction. There is only the honest accounting of what you are willing to live with and what you are not. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is admit that two honest people want different things, and let them go with the gratitude for what they were, not the bitterness of what they were not.